and welcome to Facing the Nation. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us this week. Well, on today's program, as you know, there's been much talk about cleaning up our city, cleaning up our communities, and trying to bring it back to a state of, well, of course, in the old days, they called it the Garden City. So we're trying to get it back to the Garden City. But of course, His Excellency, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Brigadier David Granger, has not only asked that we try to bring our city back to life in terms of the look, in terms of the image, a green image. He has also asked that that be done in all our communities, in all our regions across the country, because that is, of course, necessary. And that is one of the reasons the Community Development Center, CDC, has been put in place. I know usually when you hear about CDC, you think about disaster management and so on, but the Community Development Center, CDC, is a body that will be operating with directives from the Ministry of the Presidency in terms of restoring our various communities across the country. Today, it is my pleasure to be chatting with two assistant directors of the CDC. Of course, one is not here as yet. I am with the one who's representing basically more or less Region 4, Mr. Ernest Elliot. Mr. Ernest Elliot is no stranger to most of you. He has been a member of Parliament both in the 9th and the 10th Parliament of the National Assembly. And of course, he's here now, recently appointed Assistant Director in the CDC. And once again, the CDC is Community Development Centers. Of course, Mr. Elliot is here with me. Welcome, Mr. Elliot.
Thank you, Malika. I'm glad to be on Facing the Nation. And first of all, let me first say thank you to our dear President for affording me the opportunity to serve my people once again. At this level, I've accepted the invitation, and I am prepared to continue working for the upliftment of Guyana as a whole.
Okay.
As you rightly said, this new dispensation of community development council is emanated from the Ministry of the Presidency. And we have a small structure for the time being because we have to look at all 10 regions. We are not discriminating. We are looking for the development of all 10 regions and the people who reside in those regions. We have a director, Mr. Eugene Gilbert, who is a very experienced person. He knows to prepare project documents, and he has relationship with a number of funding agents and so on. Ms. Sandra Adams, another assistant director, she's from Linden, and I am one of the other two assistant directors. Basically, we have to look at all 10 regions, as I said. I will be primarily responsible for part of Region 4, Region 5, Region 6, Region 1, and Region 2. And Sandra will be responsible for part of Georgetown, part of Region 4, Highway, Region 10, and the other regions. And we are working feverishly based upon our mandate. And as you rightly said, that in times gone by, we know Community Development Council as the Community Development Council, whereby looking at the needs of the various communities and to see how best they can be empowered in training, management, and to know what are the resources we have in our various communities, and to have a database of the needs of your various communities. And that is what we were working on for the past 2 months. And we have already met with a number of funding agents. We are collaborating with our various ministries. And so because whenever you've done, all the ministries will have some aspect of programs for community development. And that is why we are working out of the Office of the Ministry of the Presidency. And we will be able to collaborate all our efforts to ensure that there is equal opportunity for every person, every community. Has no political barriers there we are working towards. And in fact, we have been meeting with those so-called CDCs. And in fact, people see CDCs in the past 23 years as a body of people looking for work.
All right, let me interject right here. So what you're saying is that CDCs already exist. This is nothing new.
This is nothing new.
So why Guyanese have not seen the benefit of or the benefit from these existing CDCs?
Because these CDCs were primarily politically motivated, and especially in Region 4 and Region 10, where people were just identified, selected, and given a contract to clean a trench here or to clean a trench there. But the whole essence of community development is to empower the people in the various communities. That wasn't done. And we are taking the initiative based upon our manifesto to ensure that those neglected communities are properly taken care of. And we are ensuring now that what we are doing is that the community will be properly notified about the setting up of these councils. In fact, on Sunday, it will be the first such community meeting, and that will be held on the East Coast. That is at Two Friends and Anns Grove. That will be one community in that big block. So we will have a community development council set up there on Sunday afternoon. And then we'll take it from there. We will move it from community to community.
Let's talk about, I want to pull local government elections in here, because in the past few months, well, not even months, let me take it as far as a year, since APNU, that's before the coalition and before we ascended to office, was calling on or pushing to the then PPP administration to have local government elections. Now, what you're talking about in terms of developing and rebuilding and rehabilitating communities, in a sense, people are looking forward for local government elections to do that. Now, how will rehabilitating these communities through the CDC, how will it coincide with local government elections? We don't want persons to think that this is some sort of substitute.
Well, local government will take its own shape. Establishing the CDCs will be in keeping with the boundaries of the local government. We know it as the People's Cooperative Unit. Some people call it a division. So we are going to muster the people in that community. So that will be easy when the time for local government, because you'll have put up candidates in each constituency, because elections will be run on a two-tier, first past the post and proportional representation. So in these CDC areas that we will be establishing, it will pave the way for people to be educated on the holding of the local government elections, because, as I said, it will be done according to the divisions in each neighborhood.
Okay.
So it will be easier for the mobilization for local government elections.
Before I even ask you about length of time and how soon we can actually see the fruits of this operation and the fruits of the CDC, I know the Georgetown City Council, obviously, Georgetown, hence the name, operates in Georgetown, deals with residents in certain areas, communities in certain areas. How closely are you liaising on with the mayor and city council to get your goals and your objectives achieved?
Right. We have started. That is our objective. In fact, yesterday we met with the RDC Region 4. We had a discussion with them and tell them our way forward. We're going to do the same thing with the mayor and city council. In fact, every region, we first will meet with the RDC, NDC, and then we'll move from there. In fact, you have a number of NGOs too in those communities. We are going to be meeting with them, because together, all of us have to work to ensure that there is equal development for the various communities. So we are not working away from those established entities, because local government is a national effort. And we are going to aid the process for the local government elections by trying to establish CDCs or NGOs. If people don't want the CDCs, we establish NGOs, so that part will be able to move the process.
So it's a situation where people can choose whether they want the CDCs or the NGOs.
Right, whatever it is, because when we finish explaining to them, they will have an opportunity. Because out of that CDC, you get your NGOs, you try to reestablish the cooperative movement, and a number of things. Because for instance, Plaisance Pandam, there's this Eddie Grant development group. And outside of that, there's another group which was formed about 3 weeks ago, a CDC. So now we'll have to bring those two groupings together. Because you see, when it comes to funding, the CDC will have much more access. The NGOs, but we are going to register our CDCs, right? So that they too can access the kind of funding and grants and so on. So everybody have to work together so that we can realize our position on the ground.
Is there a time limit to when we can possibly? I mean, this is while we're waiting on a date for local government elections. While we're waiting to have local government elections, can we look forward to seeing the fruits, the work of the CDC manifesting soon? How soon?
Well, as I said, let me tell you this: is that when we took over, we had no records. Nothing. We're starting from ground zero.
Were functioning.
But CDCs were there cleaning trenches. And as I said, it was only in Region 4 and in Region 10. You might have a sprinkling in some other regions. But we now have to go out there, right, and to establish these CDCs. So it will take some time. But in the meantime, right, we are putting a structure on the ground so that people will be so educated as to what we're going to do. Sometimes by that time you might get a date for local government elections, but despite that, we will continue to work to ensure whether before or after local government, all those systems will have to put in, because there are a number of things which central government cannot do. You can't leave everything on central government. You cannot leave everything on the Regional Democratic Council. And the neighborhood Democratic Council, too, it will be difficult. So that's why we're pushing for the CDCs, looking at the NGOs, and to see whereby we can resuscitate defunct cooperatives. So that when we have all these systems on the ground, it makes it better for central government. Because when central government cannot get a loan, right, the CDC will get a loan. The NGO will get a loan, or they get a grant to do small projects, to do training.
You talked about resuscitating defunct cooperatives, and I want to talk about the resuscitating of these cooperatives a bit. But before we do that, viewers, if you're now joining us, I am here chatting with Mr. Ernest Elliot, and he's one of the assistant directors in the CDC. Of course, CDC in this sense, in today's meaning, means Community Development Centers. And of course, they're trying to resuscitate and rehabilitate community development councils across our country. I'm also expecting another assistant director, of course, that's Miss Sandra Adams, and she will be able to tell you a little more about the work that she plans to do in Region 10. Let me also tell you, as you know, the budget debates and the budget has been passed and so on. That operation in Parliament is just completed. Last week, the Minister of State, Mr. Joseph Harmon, he was one of the ministers and one of the members to present in the National Assembly. I felt it was a really interesting presentation. So a little later on in the program, I'll also be showing you a clip of his presentation in the National Assembly. I know some of the presentations would have been shadowed, in a sense, covered by events coming after that, the examination of the estimates and so on. So I'll ensure that I show you at least a small part of his presentation in the National Assembly last week. But as we continue with our conversation, let's talk about the co-ops. Now, especially our young people, they don't understand the meaning of it, the importance of it, and what it would mean to resuscitate them and bring them back so that they can be functioning well. And I can possibly admit, I don't think I even understand the true meaning of the importance of co-ops. Let's talk about that.
The true meaning is that you come together as a group, you pool your resources, and you want to establish an organization for the benefit of the members, right, and the community as a whole. For instance, we are trying to look now at all the seamstresses in a particular area to get them to form themselves into a cooperative group so that they'll be in a position to help those single parents and those young men out there to teach them sewing and that sort of thing, so that we're able to provide them with the sort of assistance to enable them to move the project forward. In fact, the way in which the cooperatives run is based upon a community effort, based upon individuals, young and old, because you're pooling your resources, right? Your capital for a particular project. For instance, we have the livestock development company, which we're going into a lot of things, so that we are hoping that we'll be able to form those groups so that they can benefit from the sort of funding to make them much more economically strong. Because cooperative is one of the things that we use during the past to make us economically strong in the various communities. For instance, you have the Fishermen's Co-op Society, which is one of the was established in the 60s.
And what's happening with it
and
now?
that is functioning. You have one another thing in the West Coast Barbies. And we have to go back into that method because it helps your people to be more economically minded, and that you can own and control and develop yourselves and to develop your community. We are thinking about a number of things. For instance, they're talking now about ham and bacon factory. For us to get that capital, we got to form ourselves into a grouping. People plow their resources in, and you have your company going or your co-op going along. And at the end of the year, whatever it is, you get your surplus, you get your dividend, and everybody.
Let me ask you this. Really and truly, yes, there are good ideas, and sometimes I think it's hard to believe that Guyana functioned that way in the past and we were successful. And viewers, do not misread me, do not misquote me. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that my government should ban anything. But let me ask you this. How are imports, because we're in a modern era now, we look to everything, most things Americanized, and we run and we pull it off the shelves and so on. How are those imports going to affect this operation that you would want to promote, or how would the operation that you would want to promote affect imports?
Well, that is a big question. And I think that we have a discussion. We are proposing that aspect because we know how important it is. Because people talking about you're importing certain items from abroad, and it can be done right here. People saying you're talking about rice flour, right? They got a rice flour biscuit coming here, right? Plantain chips, you will believe it that some people got plantain chips coming from Trinidad. So it's something which we have to look at in a more holistic way, right? Look at the planners, because whatever we're doing, it has to take a national effort, right? We have to change, we have to have a mindset, change this culture of everything coming from North America and these kind of things. And that is why when in those days people criticize our founder leader, because when you restrict this from coming, people made money in those days, right? Carambola was a big thing on the world market, on the international market. We have to bring that back. We can't orange juice in this country. And we have this fertile land, we have all these areas, and we have to go back to these things. Cassava flour, Edo flour, sweet potato flour. And we have to look at this. The planners got to sit down now. While we are thinking of it, looking at it on the ground, the planners now got to come up with a position. So that when we're looking as a leader, put out a plan there for the 2020, we got to go beyond that now. What we will do in 2025. By that time, we might be able to set up our mill for producing plantain chips at a larger scale, whatever it is. So that by that time, you will start educating your community, the populace, so that we will move gradually. You do it gradually once, because we have to empower our people here. There's no sense we say we're empowering our people, and at the end of the day, they don't have the market. We're putting in all the effort into these factories, into this training and everything. At the end of the day, you don't have the market. So those are some of the things that we are looking at.
So you're basically talking about, in a sense, national conversations,
national
consultations
national
on these
consultation.
matters. Any, I should say, idea or plans in place to actually start this, national conversation? See, because I know His Excellency continues to talk about the fact that, even earlier today, I was having another recording with him, and he was talking about the fact that, our students, more so women, need to now start to go into the we call it the engineering, the
engineering
science.
aspect and the
Yes.
science field and so on. This
So
is very,
now,
that's excellent.
can the CDC make some sort of effort to promote this sort of education so that we can actually, have successful promotions of the programs and so on that you're talking about?
Let me tell you, we have started. We are working in some communities. In fact, we are working along with BIT, what is in the same office with us there. Board of Industrial Training. And we are getting into the communities with the application forms. Fill up a community. So that is a start, because you have engineering, the trade, where it is engineering and what have you. And we have to start at somewhere. And we want to start on that level, and then we increase on it. At the national level, they have to set up the mechanism. Because you have GTI, but we may have to expand on GTI so that we will get the kind of knowledge, so that the young people, especially women, can go out there with the expertise. Okay. So it has to be a national effort. We are going to try from the bottom. In fact, what we're doing in CDC is not a top-down thing. It is from the bottom come up. We got to get to the bottom there, get the cry from the people, hear their views, and then we bring it to the top.
In assuming that you've already started to hear from the community, hear from our residents at the community level, how have they been receiving this CDC initiative, basically new initiative, because as you did identify before, even though the CDC would have been in place, would have been in existence, nothing was really happening. So how have the residents been responding to you thus far?
So far, they are very excited, because they know that they are now going to be involved. And they are going to make the decisions on the ground. All right? They're going to make the decisions, make the recommendations, coming up to us, coming to the region, coming to the central government. So we are putting that systems in place. That system. In fact, when I announced it on Wednesday at Ansco, they had a community-based meeting for young people. And when I announced that we are going to meet with the people of Two Fens and Ansco, they were all elated. And that is why what we are doing, every community, the people must be notified. Right? It's not that you're going on and pick 10 or 12 persons out there to form a CDC, like what used to happen in the past. Right?
That's how it was done in the past?
That's how it was done. Look, I have some information here, Malika. One CDC got 3 people, and they were basically there to clean trenches, and they're receiving millions of dollars.
Just to clean trenches.
Just to clean trenches. No further development in the community. Who the money going to, only God never knows. And then we're getting complaints that are collecting 1.5, right? And only $500,000 we got to pay people, and the other 1 million gone somewhere.
But let me ask you this. What systems will be put in place though? Because I'm assuming this is still existing because, that, as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. So I'm assuming that there's still communities there where you have 3 persons getting paid just to clean drains when you should be doing everything else. But our administration has already been accused of witch hunting and taking bread out of people's mouths and so on. Of course, we know that that is ridiculous. But what are you now going to put in place to ensure that when the CDC comes and a proper structure is in place, that people will understand that, look, you can no longer get taxpayers' money just to clean drains when the CDC is actually a holistic body and should be doing more. How are you going to protect yourself from being called, oh, this is another group that Granger send out to witch hunt and take bread out of our mouths? How are you going to deal with that?
Like, we are dealing with it in good stead. Because even to the people who we call, those so-called CDCs, I have a list of 24. When we call them to a meeting, they all agreed that yes, we must form these CDCs. When you ask them when last they had a meeting, they can't tell you. But now they will be accountable to the community. For instance, you can't take somebody from, I don't want to call a community, from number 1 community and take them to number 6 community to clean the trenches. You don't know.
And that's what's happening.
And that's what was happening. The people in that community are complaining bitterly. In fact, what we have done, we put all these works on hold. And we took a decision with the RDC. Sandra, if she comes in time to tell you the same thing we have done in Linden. That we've put a hold on all these things with the consent, with the recommendation from NDIA. And we are now giving them the same set of people. In some cases, some of them will be shortchanged. A 2 months contract. And after that, the newly formed CDCs will take over. And they all understand that quite clearly.
And they will be a part of the
And
newly
they
formed?
will be a part of the new CDC. For instance, in one village, I can call it in Belfield, there's a farmers group who's cleaning the trenches as a CDC. But when we establish that CDC in Belfield, the farmers' representatives will be on that committee. And the CDC, they will take a decision on who will clean the trenches. And they have the autonomy to check the trenches, because no trenches will be passed unless if they recommend payment to the RDC and to NDIA.
Okay, all right. A lot said indeed, a lot said, and I can't wait to hear
Yes,
what the assistant director, that's the one she's going to tell you all about what she's going to be doing in Region 10. I can't wait to hear what she will tell you. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, of course, we will be joined by Sandra Adams, the other assistant director in the CDC. Do stay with us. Welcome back, and of course, thanks for staying tuned. And if you're now joining us, you've missed a lot. This is Facing the Nation. We're talking about CDCs today, Community Development Center. Of course, it's going to take some getting used to, because as I said earlier at the introduction of the program, when we hear CDC, we think about disaster management and all of that. But this time we're talking about community development councils, actually, and it's all in the effort to restore communities across our country. And of course, now we're joined by Ms. Sandra Adams. Ms. Sandra Adams is also an assistant director in the CDC, and of course, she's basically going to tell you a lot about what's happening in Region 10, Linden, where CDCs are concerned. And sometimes I always say that us here in Georgetown, we are somewhat at a disadvantage, especially those of us who are really interested in what happens in the other regions of our country. We're at a disadvantage because we can't necessarily see or hear what's going on in those communities unless someone comes to Georgetown and tells us. And as Guyanese, we all need to use the colloquial terms, we need to mind each other's business. So it is good that we're having her on to tell us about what's happening with CDCs in Region 10. Sandra Adams, welcome to you and congratulations on your recent appointment as Assistant Director.
Thank you, Malika.
All right. Great to have you. Now, let's talk about Mr. Elliot and I talked a lot about what is expected and so on from the CDC, aims and objectives, and so forth. Let's talk about your role. I know you're bringing in a sense, representative from representation actually from Region 10. What's currently happening now with CDCs in Region 10, and how has it affected communities in Region 10?
Thank you, Malika. I want to say that in Region 10, CDCs are now being properly formed, I would say, because in the past, what we had is something that I refer to as DNI project managers or DNI contractors. That's my referral to it. CDC, in its true sense, is community development councils. And so that involves everyone in a community. The way it's being structured now, it's a way to have the entire community participate in what's going to happen. In terms of making decisions, in terms of what they would like to see happen in their community, and also be a part of the process of development in their communities. Now, our president, David Arthur Granger, president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, have said to us that this time he would like to know that the people in Guyana say what they would like to have happen in their community, which is a bottom-up approach and not a top-down approach. And so at that level, we are asking people to be able to sit together and to really, come up with plans to make their community look healthy, the people in the community are developed, and a happy community will have happy families, will have happy environments. It's so many things will come together once the community gets involved. And so in Region 10, it's sad to know that we had what was the so-called CDC, 39 of them. And really there was no community development. And so we've moved to step away from that.
If I can just interrupt you. So you said 39, that's a big number. What were the 39 CDCs doing at all? Any activity would help me here.
Well, as I said when I began, there were DNI contractors, as I refer to it, and not CDCs.
When you said DNI contractors, what do you mean?
They were just digging drains and cleaning parapets. They were just digging drains.
Same situation.
And weeding.
Earlier described, okay.
And to some extent, not even making a large percentage of the community really acceptable to what you would call a standard of decent looking. What they were doing is just so much rods of a drain and a few parapets, and they get paid, and that's...
Well, let me ask you, and I must ask this question because really and truly, Assistant Director Elliot also had the same complaint and explained the same thing. Do they know when they're hired for these jobs? Or I should even ask you, are the communities, and both of you can jump in on this one, are the communities aware of what the purpose is of the CDC? Because if you're going to just have somebody there digging drains and weeding when you're supposed to be doing a lot more, why have our residents been silent on this for so long?
I think they didn't have the true sense of what a CDC is or was at the time, but they're now understanding. And I find it's very responsive because people are getting on board. People are anxious to know that they're part. I've been experiencing it in Linden. I've been experiencing calls all hours in the night, in the day. Miss Adams, when you're coming to our community to form a community development council, when you're coming because they hear this community farm and they hear that community farm, and the way they're hearing, people are putting over what it is now that they should be doing as a community development council. The excitement is building.
So they have ideas of what they want for their communities.
Yes, and it's appalling to know that there's a lot out there in terms of people expectation of their very own communities. And of course, there's a lot of needs. They have personal needs and they have community needs, they have family needs. And community development council in its true sense, or how I understand it to be, can speak to these needs if it's once it's organized in a proper way. And so we're endeavoring to do that in almost all the communities across the country. But of course, what we did is focus on the ones that were earmarked with these names, but were actually doing simply D&I work. And so in those two regions, which is Region 4,
Region
which is
10.
East Bank, East Coast, and Region 10,
Mm-hmm.
this sort of confusion, because I'll tell you what happened. That created division in many of the communities. In some communities, there's 4 so-called CDCs. Why would you want 4 when they could have come together and worked together and more people should have benefited? But of course, that was what the previous government had, so we're doing it differently.
In those cases, that example that you give, where in some communities there may have been 4, is it a case where all of the persons in the 4 were being paid?
Yes.
Were being given taxpayers' money? Let me just rephrase it. Being given taxpayers'
Yes.
money?
All of that 4 were given taxpayers' money to do work. And if I dare take it a little step further, large sums of money given for the purpose of cleaning a couple rods of drains, and some over 1 million, over 2 million, over 3 million. And you might be surprised to know that most of those groups only have 8 people working, 6 people working, 10. And then the holder of the contract draws 75% of the money for themselves. And then the other 25 is distributed among,
And of course, this is you draw that just for holding the contract.
I guess. So contract holders, in those cases were very beneficiary. The other thing is that there was situations where there are unemployed people in the community. And you would think that this is structured in a way that the people who are unemployed in that community would get the job. No, instead, the owner of the contract could choose who they want and bring in people from out of the community to work in the community where there's unemployed people. So all of that is changing.
Okay. I want to talk about funds. I know, yes, Assistant Director Elliot already said earlier that this is a project, not a project, this is operating with directions and so on from the Ministry of the President. Now, in terms of funds, because this is not cheap. Rehabilitating and breathing life back into our communities across the country is not cheap. Well, for things like materials, certain equipment, how will that be sourced? Is it solely dependent on government, or are you going to get aid from elsewhere? In both cases, both regions.
If I can jump off,
Yes.
In terms of funding, we are collaborating with, 1, all the ministries, and 2, there's a lot of funding agencies out there. It's surprising to know that so many funding agencies that can offer assistance, do projects with the people in the communities, take the community to another level, rehabilitate some building, reconstruct or construct a bridge, and help with training with the children who wants to do a little bit of farming, chicken projects. So many things are out there to offer, not only through government but also other funding agencies. But of course, what we learned that it was channeled in different directions. And so this time we're going to channel it not only to our constituency as we would look at it, but to the entire country. Because there are needs even in the very regions that these things were channeled. But we know how it was handled. But today it's a difference. Our outlook of the entire thing is that at the end of the day, every Guyanese should be able to have a good life under this APNU AFC government. And for them to enjoy the good life, you have to be able to put things in place that will shape the community to understand. Support each other, support one another, and work together in unity. I say to them, we are not looking at your culture, we're not looking at your race, we're not looking at your political persuasion. We are cutting across barriers.
Helping
Like
to build
as the
bridges.
Ministry of Cohesion will
Cohesion.
say, we're bringing
Building
people together to
building
build
bridges.
Two other quick things before I have to let you go today, lady and gentleman. And let me begin with the lady first, of course, obviously.
You understand? Because
yes.
we just from a conference. to
Yes,
talk
you know,
about gender,
from
you
a
know?
gender equality conference, so you know. Now, this is in no way to put a negative spin on it or put Linden and Region 10 in a bad light. The fact is, Assistant Director Adams, is that Linden would have had its issues. Do you get a sense now that the people believe that it's time to put all of that behind? And because in the past, the fact is Linden has even been accused of thinking that they're special than the other regions in our country.
Yes, we are.
And I know you would actually tell me this off camera, that Linden is special. Anyway, that aside, do you get the sense that this, especially the rehabilitating of CDCs now, it's a form of bringing people, putting them basically on a different level now, that it's time to move forward and time to build and so on?
I can tell you there's a sense of that happening. People have begun to, you know, you will still have a few people who are still a little uncomfortable, but generally people have begun to put differences aside and put, you know, self-preservation aside and have begun to come on board. And I am seeing it through the CDCs, because I can tell you there are several areas that CDCs have already been formed. And some of those very people who are disgruntled or whatever are taking a leading role in making sure the CDCs operate the way they are, communicating with me on a regular basis and stuff like that. So I am convinced that there's a healing process that has come to Region 10, even with the change of government. And you know, I think it brought a realization that, look, David Arthur Granger, or the president of this country, is not concerned about an individual who is disgruntled. He's concerned about all the people who have been disgruntled and bring something to them. You know, coming on stream, there's so much projects that is earmarked and directed to Region 10 to bring some kind of comfort and relief. Region 10 has been under suffrage for 23 years, and it's about time we breathe again and look like me, green, you know what I'm talking about, fresh.
Yeah.
And so I want to encourage the people of Region 10 to get on board. The other regions who we haven't met yet, we have a lot of work to do, but we are coming to you. But of course, we try to tap in on the troubled regions first, and where there was this sense of no semblance and unity and peace and stuff like that. So we're trying to bring that together, bring that cohesion through community development and to develop the countries.
And in talking about targeting, in a sense, the troubled regions first and promoting cohesion, it brings me to my question to Comrade Elliot now. Earlier, you did say a lot about your plans and so on, and I'm going to specifically ask this in Region 4. And again, this is not about me trying to sideline any particular community, any particular village. What is, or I should say, what are some of the communities that you would like to see almost immediate change, or that you plan to target first in Region 4?
In Region 4, there are a number of communities that I would like to touch on. Buxton, because of the vulnerability of it for the past 23 years. We are working on a committee there to put a number of things in place so that we can push. Apart from that, you have another area, this is Lusignan, south of the railway line. That is where we had the massacre, and so you have a lot of persons behind there who needs a kind of support. And we are working with our regional candidate, regional councillor there. And outside of that, Two Friends and Hands Grove is the first community that we'll be meeting on Sunday. Then we have Clanbrook on Beehive, another troubled area. Then we have the entire Mahika. In fact, there's one CDC in Mahika alone. And you know, Mahika that neighborhood starts from Unity right on to Vern again. So we are looking at all those things. We're not, discriminating, but they are troubled communities
That need
needs assistance. And when we look at literacy and so on, you have Victoria. I mean, we're looking at, we are on the ground. We have a problem at Haslington. Some people see the names, let's look at it. You have a problem at Beirut. In fact, they say that there's a CDC at Beirut, Sandra. But when I inquired, there's no CDC in Beirut. And those people at the back there at Bachelor's Adventure Party need the kind of support so that they can come out of that poverty. And we can go on and on. But those are the areas that I'm looking at quickly. And then so we can get to move on and so on.
Lady.
Before you wrap up,
Sure.
Malika, could I just say something? It is funny to know that all of this drainage program was going on, and still every time the rain smiles, not falls, there is flood on the East Coast. And so we've recognized even with that, there was no structured approach as to how this cleaning of drains and stuff was done. And those are some of the things, even on the East Bank, those are some of the things that we're particularly going to be looking at. That if once there's continuance, because you have to have continuance of some drainage and irrigation because of how the country is set up in terms of agriculture and all of that.
You have to have
And so what we're going to be looking at is that the community has to be linked to the farmers. So that when the farmers clean,
I said that.
the community is clean and we have
have
a
a
free
free
flow
flow.
out.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the areas that is really a challenge to us that
At
we're
this
working
point.
with.
And to let you know that a number of NDCs were culpable. They were working in unison with those so-called CDCs, signing off documents so the trenches are properly clean. But when you go down to the backlands, it's a difference. But that all will change now.
Well, I am very sure that our citizens are looking forward to this structure from you both and from the entire team. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you very much to both of you for coming, and we look forward to hearing about the works and seeing what will happen when the CDC really gets going, and especially when you marry the works of CDC to local government elections. Viewers, I did promise you earlier, of course, I do have to let the lady and the gentleman go now. Of course, I was chatting with Sandra Adams and Ernest Elliot. They are both assistant directors, CDC assistant directors. I am going to give you an opportunity to see a part of the Minister of State's presentation in the National Assembly last week. Of course, that's the budget presentation. And of course, when I come back, it will just be about that time for me to wrap up with you today. But stick around.
Our money. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make my contribution to this budget debate and to commend its passage before this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Mr. Winston Jordan, must be complimented for so quickly grasping the essential elements of an AP and new AFC vision and producing a budget which sets out clearly the administration's vision for the next 5 years.
Fresh approach.
Mr. Speaker, many have commented on the length of Mr. Jordan's presentation, but we believe the time was necessary to lay the foundation for what will happen in the next 5 years.
Yes.
What will happen in 2016? What will happen in 2017?
Yes.
What will happen in 2018,
Vision.
19, and 2020?
Vision.
Mr. Speaker, a fresh approach to the good life in a green economy is indeed fresh.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, in the last budget, under the PPPC administration in 2014, I was over there,
All right.
and the Minister of Finance was over here. And I said to the Honorable Minister of Finance, Dr. Ashley Singh then, that the budget he produced was uninspiring,
Yes.
that he was tired
Yeah.
and he needed to take a rest.
Well, he take a rest.
Mr. Speaker, it is good to see that Dr. Singh has heeded my advice
Yeah.
and taken that rest.
People give him a rest.
Mr. Speaker, a fresh approach was indeed needed. One which puts the Guyanese people on the center of all national development. Not just a selective few, Mr. Speaker, but the bulk of our people who we have to move out of the clutches of poverty. Mr. Speaker, some of the members of the opposition seem to be afraid of greening the economy.
Yes.
They are afraid that they see Granger behind every green.
Yes.
But Honorable Member, Madam Chandapal, this greening of Guyana was always there. It is in our anthem.
Yes.
If you check the third stanza of our anthem, Green Land of Guyana,
Yes.
to you will we give our homage, our service, each day that we live.
Yes. All right.
Mr. Speaker, the speakers on the opposition side would wish to convey the impression that Guyana suddenly got bad after the 16th of May, 2015. But is this the case? Is this the case? Honorable Member Rohi thinks that crime suddenly appeared. Mr. Speaker, an aspect of crime is contempt for the law and contempt for the people of Guyana. After the people voted to elect the members of the National Assembly, the PPP took their own sweet time to come to the National Assembly,
Yes.
missing out on important work on behalf of the people of this country while still drawing down the salary. Why don't you give up the salary? Give it up. Give it up. Give it up. Why are you drawing the salary? Mr.
Speaker, understanding order 40, the honorable member is making a misrepresentation. Nobody on this side of the house has received a cent from the parliament as of this moment, sir. And I ask that the member withdraw it.
Comprehension is a bad thing. He didn't say that.
Did you deny it?
Go ahead,
Mr. Rohi says, what's the point of order? What's the point of order? You give it up. Give it up. Give it up like your leader. You don't get anything? Oh man, y'all don't draw the people money and then come in any place. Contempt. That's right. What?
So we didn't say no. Yet.
You don't collect it yet.
Yet.
You say you don't want it? You say you don't want it? Well, let it come. When it come.
Honorable member, perhaps you should
Rephrase it.
say what, if you do know, what is the correct issue. If not, perhaps you should leave it for someone else to deal with.
Mr. Speaker, I will leave it for someone else to make.
then you should withdraw the statement that you made, sir.
Well, in the circumstance, Mr. Speaker, I withdraw the statement. I do hope that when the time comes to pay, you're going to refuse it. When the time comes to pay, you're going to say you want it. Good. So you don't want it. Mr. Speaker, the PPP went before the electorate of this country with a presidential and a prime ministerial candidate. Then suddenly, the process is hijacked, and a leader of the opposition is foisted on the people of Guyana, who is neither the presidential nor the prime ministerial candidate in this country. Contempt number 2. Mr. Speaker, this opposition, the opposition here, has come to the National Assembly in accordance with the Honorable Member Mr. Rohi, firing on all 4 cylinders. You say so? On all cylinders. All right. I correct again, all cylinders. Might be 1 or 2. But no firing. But Mr. Speaker, what does that mean for the people of Guyana? What does it mean? Mr. Speaker, let us go back a little to when the Honorable Leader of the Opposition demitted office as President of this country. And we will see what it is meant by firing on all cylinders. Where are we going? Mr. Speaker, at the end of the former presidency's term of office, under an article titled, "Guyanese President Leaves a Tattered Legacy," the Council of Hemispheric Affairs, in its publication dated January 26, 2011, had this to say, and I quote,
Yes, tell them.
"Jagdier could only receive the lowest marks from any independent evaluation.
Yes,
Through his tolerance of crime,
yes,
racism, and dismal social progress,
yes.
President Jagdier turned in a 5th-rate performance
Whoa.
as president of one of the poorest countries in the hemisphere. Jagdier, it goes on to say, Jagdier will go down in history as a man who did almost nothing for his nation while in office.
Speak, Joe, speak.
Further, it goes on to say, on balance, Jagdier has failed during his presidency to advance the freedom and fairness of Guyanese public life.
Yes.
Increased economic growth is futile if it does not translate. Economic activity is futile if it does not translate into a greater sense of prosperity within the entirety of the society. The entirety of the society.
Not only the friends and the favorites.
And of course, what you were viewing there is just a small part of the Minister of State's presentation in the National Assembly last week as the both government and opposition wrapped up the 2015 national budget debates. Of course, as you know, it was a spirited, that's the term they use in the National Assembly, it was a spirited debate. Mr. Harmon's time of speaking also was very spirited and heated because he did step on some toes by speaking the truth, and we always promote that you speak the truth and nothing else but it. So you got just a little piece of what really goes on in the National Assembly. That's for those of you who have never gone or you don't go very often. It is time for me to bring the curtains down on today's program. I want to thank both guests, Mr. Ernest Elliot and Miss Sandra Adams. They're both Assistant Director of the CDC, that's the Community Development Centers, and of course after it would have been established, it becomes the Community Development Councils. I'd like to thank both of them for appearing on today's program. Viewers, you at home, I thank you very much for tuning in today and for always tuning in. And of course, I invite you to join me again next time. I am Malika Ramsey. Take care of yourselves, be good Guyanese citizens, and of course, see you the next time. Goodbye.